SCP-783. There was a crooked man. The title of this article comes from a relatively well-known nursery rhyme in England, first recorded in 1842. The article itself features a bit of a different poem, but the origin of the rhyme is still unknown, with there being various theories as to the source. One legend says that it was inspired by a small village 70 miles from London that features a number of houses leaning against one another at crooked angles. Other sources state that the poem originates from the reign of King Charles I of England, with the crooked man being the Scottish general Sir Alexander Leslie, who signed a covenant securing religious and political freedom for Scotland. The crooked style in the poem is the alliance between the parliaments of England and Scotland, or the border between the two, and the crooked house refers to the fact that the English and the Scots had come to an agreement despite the animosity between them. I have no idea why I told you this, as this SCP has absolutely nothing to do with that rhyme or those theories, so let's just begin. SCP-783 is a hostile entity currently preying upon the residents of a rural hamlet in Oxfordshire, England named Tembe. It preys on the residents over a period of roughly 70 days across the fall and winter months every 12 years, and exclusively attacks those who are alone and indoors after sunset. The building where 783's current target is located will begin to experience a steady degradation of structural integrity, with visible faults and breaks on the outer facade lending the structure an angled or crooked appearance. This phenomenon also extends to any objects which breach the affected building's exterior, causing immediate and severe deformation that is invariably fatal to living subjects. So far, Foundation personnel have yet to prevent an attack or been able to provide any means of assistance to 783's targets. Additionally, due to this and 783's effects on recording equipment, little is known about its exact appearance or the nature of its anomalous attributes. Victims of 783 exhibit gross deformations in their body structure as the result of dozens of compound fractures along their long bones and severely displaced vertebra. These injuries are healed via the rapid generation of excessive cartilage and osseous tissue, with victims displaying hyperelasticity of their epidermis and musculature to accommodate the extra tissue, with one subject's forearm extending over 2.4 meters, and another having a recorded height of 12.5 meters, or over 40 feet. The end result of this malformation and elongation are subjects who visually present as being wholly serrated or gnarled. Despite the nature of these injuries, however, most victims are alive after being attacked, though they often suffer from full-body paralysis or remain in a persistent vegetative state. 27 affected individuals have been acquired by the Foundation and placed on life support so far. The residents of the hamlet are aware of 783, though speaking of it publicly is considered to be taboo. Among the local youths, researchers have documented a playground song regarding 783, which goes, "There lived a crooked man, who made a crooked deal. He kept a crooked cane, and his catch in crooked creel. He stole a crooked child, who cried a crooked squeal. And that crooked little man was broken on the wheel." A month prior to 783's current period of activity, a D-Class was selected from a group of volunteers to live in a Foundation-owned property in the hamlet, with recording equipment installed throughout the house. On the 43rd day of his stay, an incident occurred, starting with him lying in bed while reading a novel. The live feed in the living room then experiences a jagged, vertical distortion, which slowly moves across the frame from the left side to right. A similar distortion then appears in the hallway camera, obscuring the floodlights from the window opposing the camera. The D-Class, on the second floor, suddenly gets up and claims to hear a slow, prolonged scratching sound coming from the first floor. The feed from the staircase becomes wavy and distorted, with movement visible, and in the second floor bedroom, slow, deliberate footsteps can be heard ascending the stairs. The D-Class attempts to open the window and escape, but fails to open it. He then grabs a small lamp and makes several attempts to smash the window as the camera from the second floor hallway experiences visual corruption. The disruption moves through the frame until it stops immediately outside the bedroom, and the D-Class freezes as he hears a knock at his bedroom door. He approaches the door, holding the lamp like a weapon, and asks for the individual to identify themselves. There's no response, and he asks Control if any personnel were able to gain entry, but also receives no response, as observing personnel maintain radio silence. The D-Class then braces himself and throws the door open. A loud, snapping noise is then heard throughout the house, as all of the light bulbs on the premises burst simultaneously. After the camera in the second floor bathroom adjusts to the low light conditions, it shows 783 coming into view, standing motionless in the doorway. The camera in the bedroom shows the D-Class screaming and clutching his broken right arm. The arm is seen dangling freely before swiftly hardening, presumably due to rapid bone growth. The D-Class shouts his intent to escape with his life and runs from the room, but another loud snapping noise is heard. He falls to the ground, screaming for assistance, and exclaims that his leg is broken. After a few minutes, he manages to stand, showing his arm to the camera, with it now being angled in the opposite direction from the previous fracture. He curses the observing personnel, but reports that the pain has mostly subsided as he limps towards the stairs. Unfortunately, he trips and falls down the stairs, with 12 loud snaps heard in rapid succession. Upon coming to a stop, the D-Class is seen with several more fractures in various places along each limb, and he screams as they rapidly set. After nearly 30 minutes, he begins to struggle to crawl forwards, straining with the size of his limbs. Each arm is estimated to be over 2 meters in length, with several inflexible breaks that inhibit motion around obstacles. He manages to make it to the front door, with his elongated body occupying the majority of the living room and his lower legs stretching out of frame, but the length of his fingers make it difficult to work the doorknob. A scratching sound is heard in the hallway, and the D-Class expresses distress before being dragged forcibly off camera. Both the D-Class and 783 remain in the hallway for the duration of the night, with snapping sounds heard intermittently. The D-Class ceases screaming a few hours later, and sometime later, a wet, suckling noise is heard, followed by rapid thumping. At the same time as those noises, all 27 living victims of 783 and Foundation care went into seizures, convulsing for several minutes despite the fact that the majority of them were brain dead or wholly paralyzed. 2 present researchers were injured during the incident, and life support systems for several of them were compromised, killing 5. A vast quantity of earth was also disturbed on the outskirts of town during this time. Later, personnel tasked with investigating this seismic event were met with resistance from the locals, who crowded around an area in a field to the south of the town. After a brief exchange, an agent fired a round from her firearm into the air, dispersing the crowd. Several elongated toes were visible protruding from the freshly exposed earth, leading to a dig team being assembled. By the following afternoon, they had unearthed a mass grave, approximately 5 meters across, containing several dozen nude victims of 783. The bodies were well preserved, yet drained of moisture, and their number was unable to be immediately ascertained due to them being piled atop one another. They were all oriented head down, with their arms extending deeper into the pit, and most of their limbs had become intertwined or knotted around each other, preventing exhumation without the use of sawing instruments. A researcher decided to extract a tissue sample, but during the process, the soil beneath him caved in and he tumbled into the pit. The bodies shifted due to his weight, and as he struggled to gain footing, the tangle of limbs gave way and he fell out of sight. Agent Collins promptly commandeered a length of rope, tying it around her waist, and tasked several nearby personnel with reeling her in upon her signal. She then entered the pit, and approximately 20 meters worth of rope was drawn beneath the corpses as she descended. The line then became taut after several minutes, and she signaled for extraction. She was recovered safely and testified to the existence of an anomalous locale, the entrance of which is located beneath the victims' corpses. Agent Collins was then granted a temporary leave of absence, with it being implied that she suffered under the effects of 783 while down there. So, since they have some weird, unknown subterranean lair of a mysterious creature that breaks bones as a hobby, it's time to send in a D-Class to check it out. The D-Class is outfitted with protective gear, a retractable harness, recording equipment, testing apparatuses, and a basic survival kit which includes a pistol. Curiously, the start of the expedition was delayed slightly due to the D-Class not being able to fit into the protective gear, despite it being of the proper size for their frame. Once commenced, however, the D-Class is lowered into the pit via a crane, and they are soon enveloped by the mass of corpses. Command stops the descent when the D-Class begins to thrash about, but they just tell Command to continue and go faster, as they claim that a hand caressed their back. 18 meters down, they report feeling a sense of vertigo, expressing confusion regarding the direction of travel. After a brief discussion with Command, however, it's determined that they had actually experienced an inversion of gravity. They managed to reorient themselves, now climbing upwards in order to continue further into the area. Ambient light levels begin to increase, and daylight can be seen shortly after. The sky is overcast as the D-Class breaches the surface, but the surrounding area is partially obscured due to countless elongated arms extending upwards from the mass of corpses. The D-Class uses some of the arms as leverage to climb out of the hole, pulling themselves towards solid ground. The surrounding area is shown to perfectly resemble the hamlet as it exists in baseline reality, with the D-Class standing in a field on the outskirts of town. To the north is a small stone cottage, and beyond that, the main road into town, with sparsely wooded areas and fields in every other direction. Thermal and atmospheric readings also match those in baseline reality, and the D-Class disengages their harness to take a soil sample. While testing the sample, a researcher watching the feed notices dozens of marks in the ground surrounding the mass grave here, suggesting that they had been created by fingers being drawn through the ground. The D-Class is not informed of this, and they report that no contaminants have been detected in the soil, so they're instructed to head to the cottage. They proceed to knock on the door, and after receiving no answer, enter inside. It appears to be uninhabited, and they soon find a rough sketch done in charcoal above the bed, depicting the upper body of a reclined humanoid figure holding a rod or staff. Its free hand is outstretched above the headrest. The D-Class is instructed to approach and inspect the drawing, but they're hesitant, stating that they feel a great sense of unease while in the drawing's presence. They do advance slowly though, but with each step, the quality of the video feed degrades, and by the time the drawing is within arm's reach, the feed is obscured by heavy amounts of static, and the audio is drowned out by a shrill whistling noise. Before the D-Class can touch the drawing, Command orders them to withdraw, which they quickly do, causing the interference on the feed to return to normal. The D-Class leaves the cottage and walks in silence for a few minutes towards the town, finding a single boot in the road on the way. It's clear from examining it that it belongs to the missing researcher that was pulled through, and the D-Class figures that they were heading towards a nearby home, a 2-story house with a noticeably dead tree in the front lawn. The ground around the tree is littered with broken limbs, and the front door of the house is wide open. The D-Class begins to move towards the house as the director overseeing the excursion requests to be relieved of duty, citing the onset of a debilitating migraine. The D-Class enters the house, finding signs of struggle across the living room, with the couch and an end table being overturned, along with a hole in the wall. They move through into the kitchen, finding it to be in a similar state of disarray, with dishes, food, and appliances littering the floor. Most of the items show damage, suggesting that they've been struck or thrown with considerable force. As they move towards the sink, they find a small pool of blood on the floor, along with a pattern of spatter on the walls and counter, suggesting that an assailant delivered several successive blows with a bladed weapon. The D-Class kneels to take a sample of the blood, and also notes that a meat cleaver seems to be missing from a nearby butcher's block. A series of blood stains leads towards a door on the far end of the room, covered in marks and scratches, and is determined to be locked from the other side. The D-Class attempts to kick the door in, but only manages to splinter some of the wood after a few attempts. They walk back towards the other side of the kitchen and charge at the door, breaking through. They then barely manage to avoid falling down the stairs on the other side of the door, and are chided for their reckless behavior. Command tells them to go down the stairs, but after the light switch fails to turn on a light, they begin to debate the merits of investigating the basement, placing a heavy emphasis on the value of their own life. In the end, they are persuaded to continue investigating on threat of being left there. They activate their headlamp and draw their firearm, descending the stairs in a ready stance. The basement turns out to be largely empty, but something on the ground in a corner of the room glints in the light of the headlamp. The D-Class approaches, finding it to be the missing meat cleaver, wet with blood. After inspecting it, they also notice a hole in the concrete wall, an exhaust vent leading above ground. A piece of fabric is hanging from inside it, and upon closer inspection, it's revealed to be a pant leg. The D-Class pulls at it, finding it to be a tattered pair of tan slacks worn by the researcher. A rustling sound is then heard from within the vent, and the D-Class leans in closer to see. Something fleshy is then seen quickly moving up a bend in the pipe and out of sight, at which point the D-Class promptly withdraws from the home. Due to these discoveries, the researcher is presumed dead, so the D-Class is instructed to travel out of town to further document the nature of the area itself and determine its boundaries, if any. Little of note happens for the next 40 minutes as they travel, eventually passing through a densely wooded grove of silver birches. This geography remains consistent with baseline reality for another 2 kilometers, at which point the forest gives way to fields. Soon they find a small cottage, revealing that they had somehow emerged back onto the other side of town, except that they cannot see the limbs of the victims sticking out of the body pit. Approaching closer, they find a large, circular area of overturned soil instead of the pit, and a distinct lack of corpses. There's also no signs of the D-Class's presence from before, such as the harness and relay device, causing them to panic. Command instructs them to hold their position while they decide upon a course of action. They confirm that the harness's tether hasn't moved at all since the D-Class removed the harness, and determine that they have possibly entered into an iterative spatial zone adjacent from the original area. It's also decided that exploration beyond this point would best be handled by personnel experienced with excursions of this nature, so the D-Class is instructed to follow the road back towards the entry point. As they are traveling back and idly conversing with Command, they remark on the absence of any form of life. As they do so, a rustle of leaves can be heard, and the D-Class turns, finding the naked body of an elongated SCP-783 victim sprawled across the road. The D-Class swears loudly and continues, soon finding another victim stretched along the road. They withdraw their firearm and take a step towards it, when a rustling and snapping sound is heard behind them. They turn, finding that the victim there hasn't moved, but their body and arms have clearly grown and elongated, twisting and breaking, placing them closer to the D-Class's position. More snapping can be heard once again from behind them, and the D-Class quickly turns and fires their gun. The neck of the victim there had elongated and bent in a way that placed their head roughly a meter away from the D-Class, at eye level. Though several rounds are discharged into its face, it elicits no reaction, and more snapping noises can be heard from the other victim. The D-Class quickly flees at this point into the woods, running for several minutes and ignoring Command's advice to keep the road within view. They eventually stop to catch their breath, coming to rest on a large rock, with no sign of pursuit from the victims. The D-Class reloads their firearm and consumes an MRE, consulting with Command about their relative position. Eventually, they set off again, and the trek is largely uneventful over the next 14 minutes, before the D-Class suddenly stops. They claim to feel minute vibrations in the ground, coming in short, punctuated bursts, and despite being assured that this is likely due to the unstable region of space-time they're in, they insist on remaining still and listening. They inform Command of a muted thumping noise along with the vibrations, but these are not picked up by the audio device. They begin to advance carefully, and off in the far distance, a single silver birch tree is lifted vertically out of sight above the tree line, although they don't seem to have noticed it. As Command attempts to inform them of this, the tree comes back down through the treetops, much closer to the D-Class, impacting and shaking the ground. Despite the thickness and mottled white coloration, however, it is not, in fact, a birch tree, and it bears no branches. As the D-Class is instructed to approach it, another similar object lands directly next to them, knocking them to the ground. The D-Class stands and inspects the second object, seeing a faint impression of ridges and grooves running along it, as well as a flat nail plate. They fire their gun at the object, drawing blood, and a deep, protracted scream emanates from above, causing the D-Class to flee. They run through the forest, swearing incessantly and begging for assistance as more objects crash around them, seemingly trying to hit them directly. They make it out of the forest and continue towards the town, but they are soon knocked onto their back by another object colliding with them. Out in the open air, the camera feed can now see the entire length of the object, which extends several hundred meters in the air. The D-Class screams as they see what's at the peak, the nude form of the missing researcher, suspended on elongated and grossly enlarged fingers. One of the researchers overseeing the excursion stands and vomits, taking medical leave, as the elongated researcher screams and begins to try and move its massive fingers to grab the D-Class. They try to fire upon the researcher, but fail to hit it, instead proceeding to run through town while being pursued. The creature's fingers plow through various homes and obstructions as it chases the D-Class, who narrowly manages to avoid being struck. Running out of stamina, they begin to slow as the initial cottage comes into view, along with the body pit. Command encourages them on, assuring them that they're standing by to reel them back in through the pit, but the researcher creature screeches, and the D-Class is suddenly knocked aside. The visual feed is lost, and the D-Class can be heard screaming and cussing, with the audio levels suggesting that they are getting farther and farther away from their audio device. The thumping of the creature's fingers can be heard becoming more and more distant as well, and silence is recorded for the final half hour. Afterwards, the D-Class is declared to be lost, and it's decided that their harness should be recalled for future use. Agent Collins, however, cites an ethics committee mandate on the exploration of non-incursive, extra-dimensional locales, persuading them to leave the harness there in case the D-Class makes it back. Several personnel remain on hand over the next several hours, until there's a report that the tether moved. After a moment of stillness, the line becomes taut before being tugged on twice, the signal for extraction. The tether is pulled through, and after a minute, the empty body harness breaks the surface, with it appearing that none of its straps had been properly secured. It's pulled through, showing the D-Class's hand grasping onto it, which slips off as they attempt to grab hold of something to avoid slipping back into the pit. Another D-Class rushes forward to grab the hand, but they also start to get pulled in, until 3 others come in to assist, eventually pulling out the D-Class that rushed to help. As they continue to pull, it becomes clear that the original D-Class's forearm is grossly extended, and it begins to bend and snap at several points. The assisting D-Class lets go, and the original is pulled back into the pit. Since the D-Class's excursion showed that the anomaly wasn't immediately dangerous, and that the area is likely recursive, meaning that it's surrounded by copies of itself, it's decided that a special operative should be sent in. Special Operative Nyx is chosen due to her expertise in such matters, having personally mapped 27 iterations of another SCP, as well as other accomplishments. After a full debriefing and several viewings of the D-Class's exploration log, she spends her first week personally inspecting the town limits of the hamlet in baseline reality, denoting points of interest along the wooded outskirts. She then requisitions materials from HQ and makes her final preparations to head into the anomaly. She requisitions 1,000 referencing exit markers used in cave diving, a prismatic compass and map of the town, rations for a 3-day excursion, a wireless camera, a shotgun and bandolier, and a machete. Additionally, she's bringing along a K9 unit, a 2-year-old Dutch Shepherd named Tafos. I already know what you might be thinking, so if you're sensitive to that sort of thing, you may want to skip this final log. Agent Collins is chosen to oversee the excursion due to the sicknesses which affected her colleagues during the previous expedition. Nyx spends an hour practicing quick-load maneuvers for her firearm before being outfitted in full tactical protective gear. Both her and Tafos are lowered into the mass grave, and they emerge on the other side, where she promptly repairs the relay device there to activate the camera feed. There's a light early morning fog permeating the air, and there's no sign of the D-Class in the immediate area. As Tafos comes out of the tangle of corpses in the pit, he passes beneath a low-hanging limb, which breaks with an audible crack, and stops just short of touching him before it's swiftly severed by Nyx's machete. As they leave, intermittent cracks can be heard from the severed appendage as it continues to convulse and fracture. The first 15 minutes of their travel consists of heading in a southeasterly direction, gradually identifying memorized aspects of the environment. Due to the lack of life forms, the only sounds are crunching leaves as they progress. Once a felled tree is spotted, Nyx identifies a point which should be in the northwestern area of the town, so she hangs a referencing exit marker on a nearby branch and begins walking off the path into the woods to further delineate the area in which the replicate town ends. She methodically begins canvassing the woods and cross-referencing her map, placing more REMs, as Taphos follows alongside her and occasionally sniffs the area. 45 minutes pass uneventfully until Taphos pauses, alert and focused on an area ahead of them. Nyx readies her shotgun, and the two proceed with caution. Up ahead, a long, gnarled white shape can be seen snaking through the undergrowth and between trees, partially obscured beneath scattered leaves and detritus. Taphos approaches the object before halting at Nyx's command, and mottled white flesh can be made out on the object, as well as varicose veins running along its length. The appendage trails far off into the distance, while the other end terminates nearby in an average-sized foot. Command tells Nyx to investigate the foot, which can be seen sporting a colorful tattoo encircling the shin. Closer inspection reveals it to be a tattoo of an Ouroboros, confirming the cadaver's identity to be that of the missing D-Class. An alarm then goes off back at command, as one of the doctors that was previously involved in the operation has escaped their quarters with the assistance of a D-Class. A search unit is deployed, and the residents of the town are notified of the fugitives. Nyx, receiving no guidance from command about a course of action, states that she's going to follow the limb through the woods and into the next iteration of the area. The two begin walking, until 3 quick, bone-splintering cracks are heard behind them. Nyx quickly turns, seeing that the D-Class's ankle has snapped and twisted so that its foot is raised off the ground and coiled, with toes pointing in her direction. Taphos begins growling as Nyx slowly backs away, and the two eventually turn and continue on as no more movement is seen. The two follow the leg for approximately 1.5 kilometers, where it then zigzags up a nearby incline, crossing perpendicular to a dirt path that ascends a rocky hill. Nyx checks her map, identifying this as Shallows Peak, the town's highest point of elevation, which lies north of town. She attempts to radio command, but gets no response, and reports that she's going to ascend the hill in order to canvass the area. The ascent takes roughly 20 minutes, during which time the fugitive doctor is recovered by a constable after trying to enlist the help of local police. The D-Class was shot and killed during the confrontation that led to the doctor's capture, with their remains being returned to base. While climbing the hill, the dirt path can be seen leading alongside a rocky wall before ending at the mouth of a small cave. Nyx notes that this cave does not exist in baseline reality, and as she approaches, the visual feed degrades slightly as Taphos whines quietly. In between static interference, the cave is seen to possess signs of habitation, with the walls on the right having been carved to create small shelves, speckled with indiscernible filth. An ancient cast-iron lidded pot sits in the center of the room, atop a mound of partially burnt petrified wood encircled by rocks. On the left, discoloration in a small area of the cave's rear suggests the former existence of bedding in that corner, long since rotted away. Nyx takes 2 steps in before stopping short, looking back to Taphos, who remains outside the entrance, with his tail tucked between his legs. Nyx heads back and coddles him, telling him to stay there, as she moves back in to check the shelves. Small bits of wicker, possibly some form of ornamentation, crumble upon being touched. Advancing to the pot, a carving can be seen on its side, likely a representation of a breaking wheel, a medieval torture device involving an individual being strapped to a wheel while their limbs are broken repeatedly. As she removes the lid to the pot, she gags. It's filled with a murky brown pool of stagnant water within which floats several objects. She turns on her headlamp and gasps at the sight of over a dozen small bones, with it estimated that they belong to an individual no more than 2 months old. The display is further plagued by static as Nix replaces the lid and sets the pot down carefully. She then pauses momentarily, partly stands and staggers, before proceeding to fall to her knees and vomit profusely. She curses quietly and sniffles, obscuring the camera as she wipes her face. She then looks up and sees a small nook in the cave wall beside where the bed previously lay, with something small and brown inside of it. Static builds as she moves to investigate, kneeling and pulling out the object. The visual field is overcome by white noise, though Nix can still be heard, reporting that she's found some form of diary. Flipping through the first few weathered pages reveals little of import, as any content that may have once been present has long since faded. She continues to scan the diary until a hollow popping noise rings out. Turning quickly, no immediate threat or change in surroundings is seen. Taphos begins approaching cautiously, and another sharp, wet pop is heard. He growls as Nix glances around for the noise's source, and the sound is heard a third time. The lid of the cast iron pot vibrates as it is struck from within, causing Nix to flee from the cave. Back at command, the D-Class's remains are being tended to, while Agent Collins gets back on the headset to speak with Nix, who has now reached the top of Shallows Peak. She relays the events of the previous hour, and can now clearly see both the area she arrived in as well as its duplicate to the west. In a panoramic shot, a dozen windmills of further replicates can be viewed far off in the distance. She explains that although the pattern of the surrounding area supports the recursive iteration theory of this dimension, there are noted inconsistencies within the area. Other than the cave, which did not exist in baseline or the initial replicate, there's also a small grove of dead trees nearby, along with an unidentifiable structure in the nearby town center. Command asks why there would be deviations in the pattern, to which Nix suggests that the presence of the elongated D-Class spreading across 2 iterations may be causing fluctuations, comparing it to cellular lysis. Foreign material could weaken the border between spatial zones if held there for an extended period of time. Despite the instabilities, however, she posits that the deformations in this zone may be reflections of the historical state of the town, presenting a valuable research opportunity. She begins down the hill, as small cracks and pops can be heard still reverberating within the cave as she passes, although she does not look inside. At the bottom of the hill, a path of dead grass and foliage can be seen where previously the D-Class's leg was. Taphos sniffs around the area and begins following the trail towards the next iteration of the town. The two travel at a steady pace, with Nix regularly checking behind them as they progress, and the forest slightly darkens as cloud cover obscures the sun. A sharp sound of bone snapping echoes in the distance, followed by a series of bone splintering sounds from an indiscernible source. Nix attempts to follow the noise when the D-Class's foot emerges from the canopy, quickly twisting and braking to turn to face Nix. She responds by shooting it 3 times rapidly with her shotgun, shredding it and causing it to hang loosely from the limb. It sways back and forth from the force of the shots, and Taphos snarls and barks at it as the two carefully move around it. As they pass it, however, the appendage swiftly plunges to the ground, and Nix breaks into a run as the coiled mass of limb begins to shift. The two rush through the forest, with Taphos in the lead, leaping and dodging over obstacles. Behind them, a furor of rustling and banging can be heard as the leg bursts through foliage and violently rebounds off trees. Nix proceeds to take some sharp turns through the forest in an attempt to tangle up the leg between the trees, but she becomes separated from Taphos in the process. There is a crash as the appendage ricochets off of a nearby tree to her right, with the remains of the foot shooting across her path, cutting her off. Nix slides underneath it, firing into the flesh with her shotgun as she does so, and continues running. The camera feed soon shakes, however, as she is struck from behind and falls to the ground. Her shotgun is knocked aside, and as she crawls towards it, there's a quick flash of mottled flesh on the camera, and the limb begins to wrap around her. Her arms are now pinned to her sides, and she's pulled into the leg's many folds before it begins to tighten, causing her to scream. The remains of the foot then come into view, hovering in front of Nix's face. There's a pair of cracks as the remaining pinky and big toes splinter and fracture, forming two sharp prongs. The foot rears back momentarily before launching forward. Just as it's about to strike Nix, there's a flurry of motion as Taphos leaps from off-camera and catches the foot in his mouth. The limb writhes as the animal wrestles with the appendage until it eventually loosens and drops Nix. It twists and curls as Taphos tears into it with his teeth, and Nix manages to make it to her shotgun. As she turns, however, the limb wraps around Taphos and quickly retreats, pulling the dog further into the woods. Agent Collins informs Nix that she needs to progress towards the next town. She is advised not to follow the limb and to consider the animal a lost asset. Logic has no place in these types of situations, however, and Nix charges after the fleeing leg. The knot of flesh wrapped around Taphos shreds a path through the forest, knocking down some of the smaller trees, and it begins to pull itself upward out of the forest. As it does so, however, the mass becomes caught between a pair of trees, and Taphos whimpers as the flesh constricts to try and squeeze through. Nix catches up, lunging forward with her machete, and there's a high-pitched shriek in the distance as she strikes the mass again and again. She bellows a long scream herself as she viciously assaults the leg, cutting through the flesh and revealing bone. She continues to hack and chop and shout as the dog whines and attempts to free itself. The leg then stops trying to pull through and instead raises sharply upward, knocking Nix away. Taphos' cries can be heard above her before trailing off into the far distance. Nix proceeds to scream in anger, shouting threats into the wilderness, and it takes several minutes for her to calm down. She radios command, asking for help to hunt the leg, but she's denied. She's instructed to either investigate the town in her cell or abort the mission, so she continues on. Soon she makes it to the farmland encircling the town, finding it to be barren here, without a single piece of vegetation sprouting from the dirt. She enters the town itself, quietly moving through the streets, and finds a general store with several SCP-783 victims pressed up against the plate glass window. Another victim is on the second story of the hardware store, and 3 more are peering out from within a car that's crashed into a lamppost. Another is visible beneath the grate of a storm drain, its face contorted and pressed up against the bars with enough force that bits of fat press up upwards through them. None of the victims move to attack her, however. A sudden cacophony of splintering wood and breaking glass interrupts the silence, and Nix turns to see that the buildings flanking the end of the street have taken a broken, crooked appearance. Their foundations crumble, and before Nix can react, the pair of buildings collapse inwards, blocking the road she'd entered from. Whether due to the sudden noise or the possible presence of 783 itself, the corpses around Nix begin to shudder violently. The trio in the car can be seen thrashing about wildly, their bones breaking and snapping and rapidly healing and stretching. Within seconds, the entirety of the sedan is full of flesh knotted together and writhing as the windshield cracks from the pressure. Back in baseline reality, it's noted that the D-Class who was killed during their escape has now entered the control room. Nix continues towards the town center, finding a major deviation from baseline reality. In the center of the intersection, in front of the town hall, stands a sizable wooden platform, supported on a large, sturdy base. Erected in the middle of the platform is a large, rounded contraption with an unidentifiable mound upon it. Nix approaches, ascending the stairs, finding the contraption to be a wheel with several spokes radiating from its center. The mound is a nude and disheveled human strapped to the device, face down. In each area where their limbs cross an empty space between the wheel's spokes, the appendage is gnarled and broken, with their left leg swollen and grossly extended, trailing off the side of the platform. Looking to her right, she sees a singular piece of parchment nailed to a post atop the stairs. The document is a sensationalized proclamation of guilt, identifying an individual by the name of Hinger Wunabald, guilty of theft, child murder, rape, witchcraft, and cannibalism. It finally goes on to state that for his punishment, he is to be broken on the wheel. Nix confirms with command that they've received a clear capture of the paper before casting it aside. She takes a moment to re-rack her shotgun with slug ammunition before moving towards the wheel. Prodding the corpse with the barrel of her gun elicits no response, and she moves around to look at its face. Kneeling down, she sees that it's the missing D-Class, although their face is bloated and their features are twisted in agony. Upon verifying their identity, Nix follows the length of the leg with her camera, seeing it lead off behind a nearby building. She states her intention to follow it to Tafos, but she's interrupted by a low moan, and she turns back to the corpse. As she turns, the eyes of the D-Class focus on her, and she reels back and fires, destroying the upper part of the D-Class's head. The body gurgles and seethes as she continues to fire 2 more rounds down its trunk, causing it to spray a torrent of blood from the remains of its mouth. Nix recoils as she's coated in the blood, stumbling back, and there's a sickening crack as the lower jaw of the D-Class contorts and lengthens. The jawline lashes out at her as she attempts a quick load of her shotgun, spraying more blood and obscuring the camera. Nix is heard hurriedly descending the staircase, and the camera continues to be obscured as she's heard evading and combating the ever-breaking jaw of the D-Class. She's heard shouting and crying, bone is heard breaking and splintering, and the sound of her fending off the attack with her machete. A lone shotgun blast then rings out, and the weapon can be heard clattering to the ground before everything falls silent. Nix proceeds to clear the camera to the best of her ability, showing the jaw stretching from the D-Class's corpse and crisscrossing throughout the intersection. Blood blankets the majority of the area, and several teeth are visible. Nix is panting and heaving, and she shows that she lost the index finger on her right hand as she tries to stem its bleeding. She begins to look for her lost finger, soon finding it, but as she moves towards it, it begins to wriggle on the ground, snapping and beginning to elongate. Nix turns to flee, grabbing her shotgun as she does so. Command prods her towards returning to the platform to look for more evidence, but she instead rushes along the length of leg trailing from the corpse. She swears at Agent Collins and casts her helmet aside. Nix is seen running down a length of road alongside the leg, following it around the corner. Several minutes pass uneventfully, until the leg shifts and gyrates, slapping the ground with excessive force for approximately 30 seconds before becoming still. A minute later, the camera's lens spontaneously cracks. There's heavy breathing, and someone is sobbing. The area darkens as it is cast in shadow, and the feed terminates as the camera is destroyed. In the aftermath, Nix is deemed AWOL, and it's determined that a fully armed force would be required for the capture or elimination of SCP-783. The third and final field log for SCP-783 consists of a full MTF being deployed to do just that, but so far that data has been expunged. Hopefully we get to read that at some point in the future. So far, however, we're left with far more questions than answers about 783 and the area it occupies. Curiously, it doesn't seem like 783 itself ever makes an appearance in the alternate dimension, but its effects are certainly present there. There's definitely more going on here than just some monster that breaks into people's homes in a small village in England and breaks their bones for fun. There's definitely something affecting the document itself and various individuals that aren't explicit victims of the attacks. When the first D-Class is attacked in the house by 783, their D-Class number in the document becomes crooked, with one digit lower than the others. This same effect applied to Agent Collins after she briefly visited the other dimension, despite nothing else really happening to her. Also, this effect applied to the D-Class's number who was killed by the local police, not to mention the fact that they somehow entered the command room afterwards and nothing else was mentioned about it. There are some hints here about a situation somewhat akin to Nightmare on Elm Street, in which a criminal is violently killed after committing some heinous crimes, possibly to local children, and then continues to haunt the town as vengeance. The local nursery rhyme that the kids sing points to all of this, much like the nursery rhyme in the Nightmare on Elm Street films. The execution platform Nix found suggests that 783 is possibly Hinger Wunderwald, who was executed for child murder and cannibalism, among other things, and the pot she found in the cave did contain children's bones. Somehow I doubt this problem will be solved by a group of spunky dream warriors, but maybe excessive amounts of bullets will do it. It's a shame that Nix's and Taphos's fates are left unknown, but I like to think that they managed to survive, and will join up with the MTF to unleash hell on the Crooked Man. SCP-6462, The Implicit Door. The SCP universe has its fair share of godlike entities, many of them quite capable of obliterating reality as we know it. Some of them are actually contained by the Foundation, but many of them are barred from entry for other reasons. The Scarlet King has been a long-standing threat to existence, always perpetually on the fringes of our reality and desperate to come in and wipe everything out. His 7 brides and their children are also themselves incredibly powerful and anomalous, with most of them also capable of ending humanity at a moment's notice. SCP-6462 concerns one such bride, locked away for all time, although, of course, she'd rather not be. I'll mention here that I'm not going to go over too much of the Scarlet King mythos in this video, since it's still enjoyable without in-depth knowledge, but I'll recommend my own video on the Scarlet King if you'd like to know more. With that, let's take a look. SCP-6462 is a pocket reality located within Relic Universe 7V Omega, which was previously believed to have been rendered unable to sustain reality during the Third Crimson Crusade, one of the first recorded cross-universe wars. Its position within the Relic Universe appears to have hidden its existence from the multiverse at large, as all available multiverse maps display it as an empty dead zone. The only way to independently learn of the pocket reality's existence is to isolate 6462-A, trace it to its point of origin, and then utilize a Scranton-Meyerbeer arc to travel to that origin point. Needless to say, it's a pretty hard to find location. 6462-A is an anomalous form of radiation that occurs in the space between universes. It was developed through the Trifrost Initiative, an ongoing Foundation program to develop a non-anomalous method of cross-universe transportation, and its anomalous properties were brought to light by the standard exposure tests that were performed following its discovery. These tests involved exposing subjects to concentrated emissions of this radiation, and then closely monitoring them for physical or psychological changes. The first 45 tests are removed from the log for brevity's sake, but the 46th test, performed on 3 live chickens, revealed something more interesting. Autopsies of the 3 chickens revealed that the stomach linings of 2 of them became lined with teeth-like growths. The 3rd subject's stomach appeared unaltered, but further examination revealed that it was entirely composed of human ovarian tissue. The subject's stomach tissue was discovered to be genetically identical to ovarian tissue samples taken from SCP-231-5, one of the subjects that was rescued from the organization called the Children of the Scarlet King before perishing. In Test 57, which was performed on 15 D-Class, the subjects reported regularly experiencing strange and upsetting dreams over the course of the month following their exposure. A majority of reports display imagery and themes commonly found in the religious texts of the Children of the Scarlet King. We're provided a few of the D-Class's dream reports, starting with one that reports being in a cave that was also a river, and it being completely dark. They had a rope tied around their waist, which they knew led back to the surface. They were barefoot, and it was quiet, with only the sound of dripping water. Sometimes they heard someone else breathing, hot, on the back of their neck, and it felt like they were getting bitten. Whenever that happened, they'd freak out and start running, but they'd forget about the rope and have to turn back. Eventually, they found the surface, but then they looked down and realized that the rope was actually their own intestines, with the other end tied to a tree at the mouth of the cave. Another had a dream in which they were going to a party with their sisters, but they were all really sad about it. They never got to the party though, as it was like they were always on the verge of arriving. When asked about the sisters they had in the dream, the D-Class says that all 6 or 7 of them were wearing these long gowns and had heavy metal bracelets on both wrists. Another D-Class had a dream in which he was in some kind of ceremony or ritual, like something from a bad horror movie. There was chanting, guys in robes, and a young girl in a white gown chained to a stone slab. He expected the girl to look terrified, but she was just sort of resigned. They gave the D-Class a dagger to cut her open, but before they could make him do it, he woke up. He then appears conflicted before saying that they wouldn't have needed to make him do it, as he wanted to do it, and still does. He rubs his face with his hands and says that he thinks there's something really wrong with him. He was administered Class C amnestic shortly after the interview's conclusion. Another D-Class, when interviewed about their dream, simply stated the word red. When requested to clarify, they attempted to comply but were unable to describe their dream in any other words. Another D-Class, during her interview, remarks that she doesn't remember her dad's face. He died in a car crash when she was 9, and she doesn't remember his face. He came into her room last night, through the red of the howling moon's eye, but his face was wrong. He wasn't wearing it right. She then begins bleeding from her left nostril and says that here he comes now, before suffering from a severe heart attack. The pocket reality of SCP-6462 does not experience a day-night cycle, but instead experiences a perpetual dim light from a star similar to our Sun. It lacks any form of native, non-bacterial organic life, and muscle mass atrophies at an increased rate within the reality, though not at a pace that cannot be counteracted by exercise and a high-protein diet. With the exception of 6462-B, its landscape is predominantly flat and featureless, dotted with stone outcroppings. 6462-B is a 2,500 square kilometer city situated within the reality, the structures of which bear strong stylistic similarities to pre-Renaissance Daevite architecture, though no physical evidence of human habitation has been found. With one exception, all of the structures are hollow and deceptively fragile, and nearly all instances of text have eroded to the point of illegibility. The city is inhabited, however, by an unknown number of humanoid entities composed of dense, shadowy matter. These entities temporarily cease existing while directly perceived, and so all sightings have been in the periphery of the viewer's vision or heard in such a way that the listener was uncertain of the sound's source. Any camera within a 52-meter radius of one of these entities may begin displaying one or more entities that are not actually there, and up to 44% of recorded images of the entities are potentially false. These entities are aggressive and violent, but not directly confrontational, usually choosing targets that are alone or attacking through ambushes. They are, however, either unable or unwilling to harm or impede Foundation personnel within one structure in the city, and so its central hall has been made the location of the central base camp within the reality. Before this discovery was made, MTF Aleph-7 attempted to create a safe zone where Foundation researchers could work with relative safety. During this time, one agent, Gabriel Dubois, was separated from his team in an altercation that destroyed his portable radio and damaged the broadcaster on his body cam. 45 minutes later, his body cam continued broadcasting, showing him in what he thinks to be some kind of hospital on the 3rd floor. He's barricaded the door, and it's managed to hold so far, although he has no idea how, as the furniture is very brittle. He only barricaded the door because he thought it would slow them down as he climbed out the window, but there are none in this room. He thinks those shadow entities are waiting just outside the door, as he can hear them whispering. He approaches the door, where indistinct voices can be heard. He thinks that they're telling him to open the door over and over again, but he's not sure why they don't just do it themselves. He's seen one of them pull a man's arms off like a kid with a Barbie. A clearer voice is then heard saying that he's thinking of the wrong door. Dubois yells and turns, and the broadcast ends, with the final image seen appearing to be a window in a room. His body has not yet been recovered. The singular structure of importance in the city is located approximately at its center, and is a large palace host to multiple spatial anomalies, as moving through a doorway inside the palace transports the subject into a different random room. The seventh doorway one travels through will always return the subject to the central hall. The only thresholds not subject to this anomaly are the doorways at both ends of the central hall, one being the front entrance, and the other leading to the throne room. Currently, 306 distinct rooms have been discovered within the palace, and we're given a brief list of some of the more notable ones. There's the central hall and the throne room, as well as a conservatory containing several forms of dead plant matter, including gold leaves of similar hue and shape to that of an apple tree. Specifically, it's noted that it's similar to the Ithun variety of apple tree, apparently a reference to the Norse goddess Ithun, responsible for cultivating golden apples that provided the Norse gods with immortality. Another room is the armory, with 45% of the objects found inside of it being utilized to construct the on-site Surtur-class warhead. 47% of the room's contents have been transferred to a hazardous materials storage site, and the remaining 8% have not been moved, as attempting to do so has been deemed too dangerous. There's also a library, and although almost all texts in the room have been rendered unsalvageable, 4 legible texts have been uncovered. The first partially resembles existing descriptions of SCP-6019, a complex religious rite connected to the origins of Sarkicism, the Church of the Broken God, and the Church of the Scarlet King. The other 3 texts are currently being translated. There's a bloodletting room, and upon entry into this room, all adjacent thresholds automatically seal themselves until the stone bowl in the center is filled with 2 liters of blood. There's also an empty chamber in which the floor is covered with an unknown tar-like substance, and loud knocking can be heard through its northeast wall. This is a reference to SCP-4221, an entity that secretes a black tar-like substance and is terrified of the color red and the number 7. Room 238 is a birthing room, although the cognitohazard in its description has been expunged, and room 253 is the ocean chamber. This room contains a body of water of unknown size that vastly exceeds the surface area of the palace. Cursory explorations of this room have uncovered the fossilized remains of an unknown mammalian species that bears extreme resemblance to a sperm whale. This is a reference to the somewhat jokey, somewhat serious take that the Scarlet King, his brides, and their offspring are all whales. Moving on, 6462-C is a stone casket approximately 3 meters wide, 5 meters long, and 2 meters deep. It's suspended in the air above a stone throne in the center of the throne room, wrapped in 7 chains composed of an unknown silver material. Each chain is attached to a metal loop that has been embedded in either the north or south wall. A 4th loop has been observed on the south wall, but no evidence of an 8th chain has yet been found. The casket has a desiccating effect on all forms of liquid and organic matter within a 5.4 meter to 2.2 kilometer radius, with the rate of desiccation and size of its range of effect being inversely proportional to the amount of liquid removed from the casket within a recent time span. Entrance into the palace was not initially possible until 3 members of the MTF accidentally entered the casket's range of effect, subsequently losing all moisture in their bodies within 2.9 seconds. There is a symbol crudely etched into the casket's lid, partially obscured by its chains. It appears to be a Daevite glyph, meaning lack, thirst, hunger, longing, or emptiness. We're provided a link to the tale Dust and Blood, which details a number of aspects about the Scarlet King and his brides. That seal corresponds to the fifth bride, Anut, stated to be strong in mind but frail in body, her children being masters of the hidden arts and destroyers of men and cities. For their great power, the king had them crippled, so that they might not rise up against him. Her seal means lacking, for her spirit is restless. Her hunger shall never be satisfied, and her thirst shall never be quenched. Probably best to keep that casket closed then, and in fact, the document states that the casket is not to be interacted with under any circumstances, although this line is crossed out. Temporal SCPs. The SCP Foundation at this point meddles with the fundamental laws of reality with such regularity that it's likely at least one researcher breaks a law of physics on their way to the break room every day. Time is certainly no exception to this, and there are quite a lot of temporal SCPs out there, ones that either muddle with, bend, or break time completely. I've already covered some articles that specifically focus on time loops, whereas these cover time in a broader sense, which does, of course, cover a lot of ground. With that out of the way, let's take a look. Let's start with SCP-6871, a thaumaturgic ritual that's capable of removing persons, objects, and/or phenomena from the baseline timeline. When executed properly, the target's impact and actions within the timeline will be retroactively erased and replaced. Obviously, this isn't going to end well. We're given a brief testing log of the ritual, starting with a D-Class, conducting it to remove a dollar bill from existence. No differences were noted, so they tried again on a dollar bill previously used by Dr. Brenda to purchase coffee. This resulted in Dr. Brenda being visibly more tired throughout the day, leading to smaller progress on her current project than before. They then decided to bring in a different D-Class to erase the first one, reverting the changes they had made. After that, they tried bringing in a third D-Class, erasing the second one and bringing reality back to where it was before, with Dr. Brenda still tired. In the fifth test, for some reason, they decided to erase Dr. Brenda from the timeline, which seems a bit cruel. This resulted in research on the numerous anomalies she was involved in being visibly more advanced, because Dr. Williams, who she had fought for her position with, took over in this timeline and achieved a much higher clearance level. Okay, so in a twisted way, I guess that did help out the Foundation a bit. But then they decide to erase Dr. Williams as well, resulting in that position going unclaimed and removing the discovery of 7 previously known SCP objects. Normally, this might be where they leave things better off alone, but they then decide to erase Dr. Elias Shaw, the current holder of SCP-963, an amulet that allows Shaw's consciousness to overwrite anyone wearing it. The ritual managed to remove the current host of Shaw, but the amulet and Shaw's consciousness remained unharmed. They stepped it up then by removing all 126 hosts, but 126 other individuals were found to be hosts afterwards. Insistent on getting rid of this thing, they then performed the ritual on SCP-963 itself, which removes Shaw's consciousness alongside all research progress he had achieved. This must not have been too acceptable, as they immediately deleted the D-Class responsible for doing so, restoring the timeline again. Surprisingly, the administrator of the Foundation then stepped in to perform the ritual on SCP-6871 itself, presumably to prevent any more temporal shenanigans, but he was actually overruled by Delta T, a trans-temporal Foundation agency, to avoid a temporal paradox. With the ritual still intact then, O512 came in to try to remove a long-standing thorn in the Foundation's side, SCP-682. Despite the ritual's proper execution and the object's initial removal alongside the damage it caused, 682 reappeared in its cell seconds later, calling the attempt pathetic. Undeterred, O512 then used the ritual to remove the entire race of the Children of the Night, SCP-1000. This resulted in humanity being the dominant species ever since its inception, and human society being advanced beyond recognition. Numerous deific entities and outstandingly advanced technology have been integrated into society. The rest of the council wasn't happy with this, as O512 had done those tests on his own, so they used a D-Class to remove him, restoring the timeline. It seems they still recognized the ritual's potential to remove problems, however, and decided to use it to erase MTF Alpha 1, Red Right Hand, in order to remove the Chaos Insurgency. They did so, along with 2% of the Foundation's scientific personnel and 1.5% of other MTF units, who were apparently spies working for the insurgency. The Council then went even a bit madder, deciding to remove the head of the Global Occult Coalition, which resulted in the GOC being erased from the timeline. As a result, the Foundation became the main anomalous organization in the world, currently rivaling a worldwide rebellion led by the Grand Karcist Ayun alongside the Clavagar. Not content with that arrangement, they proceed to use the ritual to remove Ayun, but this resulted in human society regressing back to the Bronze Age. A majority of human progress, alongside the Church of the Broken God and all O5 Council members, disappear from reality. Records indicate that humanity was unable to progress further than said age for more than 3,000 years. Oops. We're then told that this document was found in the Deep Well archives of the ruins of a building marked as Exclusionary Site 01 in Oregon during a coalition raid following civilian reports of unidentified ruins found within the woods. Research indicates that the building is at least 2,000 years old and belongs to a worldwide organization specializing in the containment of anomalous phenomena called the SCP Foundation. No organization by that name or evidence supporting its existence exists. Well, sure seems like the Foundation screwed the pooch on that one. Next we have SCP-1032, a silver alarm clock bearing 26 hands of various sizes and shapes. The movements of these hands do not measure the passage of time, but rather measure the time until the end of an ongoing event or the destruction of an extant entity. White text on the front of each hand, in sizes ranging from barely legible to microscopic, describe the event to be measured by that hand. When one of the hands reaches the 12 o'clock position, several events occur simultaneously, the combination of which is referred to as a midnight event. First, the event or entity currently written on the hand ends or is destroyed. Second, the text on the hand spontaneously changes to describe a new event or entity. And third, the hand's rotational velocity changes. To date, the clock has never been wrong, as every event appearing on its hands has ended precisely at the moment of the corresponding midnight event. It has accurately predicted the deaths of a redacted 5-digit number of individual organisms, the fall of a number of governments, the dissolution of dozens of major agencies and institutions, the death of a language, and the beginning of a redacted event. Since any given hand's speed remains constant at all times except during midnight events, the time to the end of any entity measured by one of the hands can be predicted precisely. We're given a list of all of the hands and their current designations, starting with the smallest hand and going to the largest. The first hand rotates too fast to have a constant measurement, and has only ever been recorded as having the words a thought, a sound, or a sensation. The second hand moves too slowly to measure, and just has the words, the worst thing that will ever happen to anybody written on it. The third hand had the words, my safe classification, written on it, with a predicted end time of June 2nd, 2012. A researcher suggested that since the clock is showing signs of self-awareness, it should be promoted to a Euclid-class threat. The proposal was scheduled for review on June 2nd, 2012, at which point it was changed to Euclid-class. The text then changed to read, "My Euclid classification," with a predicted date of January 9th, 2015. Since the clock has yet to manifest any properties warranting a Keter classification, another researcher suggested that it be demoted to safe. He notes that blindly following this prediction isn't very productive, but if they don't, it might start doing things that force them to make it Keter. The fourth hand has the universe written on it, with the predicted date being expunged from the record. The fifth has a failed infomercial on it, and this hand moves very quickly, cycling 2 to 5 times per day. To date, it has never displayed any other inscription. Sixth has Freedom of the Press on it, with a predicted date of May 16th, 2073, although it doesn't specify the country or countries whose freedom of the press will end. Seventh has Humor, ending in 2052, and eighth has the use of the phrase, "You can say that again," ending in 2267. The ninth has hostilities between the nations of Africa, ending on an expunged date, although it's noted that due to the clock predicting violent or disturbing events using apparently harmless phrases, this could mean either peace in Africa or the destruction of the continent. The 10th hand always describes individual human beings, currently being Jason W. Taylor Jr.'s sister's daughter, and these people are usually difficult or impossible to identify and locate. In 2011, however, it predicted the death of a D-class that was assigned to SCP-1032, so he was sealed in an airtight steel chamber with 2 guards, all 3 equipped with self-contained breathing apparatus. Despite this, he expired exactly at the predicted time, with his death being determined to be caused by his oxygen tank being mistakenly filled with pressurized VX nerve gas used to control another SCP. The 11th hand predicts the end of a president's term in office, although most of this has been redacted. The 12th always describes a non-corporate restaurant, currently a burger joint. In 1993, in an attempt to keep a hot dog place from closing as predicted, the Foundation donated an anonymous $10,000 to it to remain open, but the owner renovated the place and renamed it. The 13th hand has the number 2020 on it, with a predicted date of January 1st, 2022, and the researchers were attempting to discern whether or not this would constitute the clock's first failure. I think we can safely file that one away. The 14th hand isn't listed, but the 15th has the words "effective containment" on it, ending in 2690, apparently the same date that SCP-094, a miniature event horizon, will fully engulf the Earth. The 16th hand has Project Serapis, ending in 2016, with the notes expunged, and the 17th has SCP-343, God, listed on it, although the date and the notes have been redacted. The 18th and 19th hands have been expunged completely, while the 20th has been mostly redacted, with just the notes mentioning a popular Mexican soap opera. The 21st hand has the SCP Foundation written on it, although of course the date and notes have been expunged. The 22nd hand has Concern for Public Health, ending in 2032, while the 23rd has Anomalous Pathogenic Outbreak written on it, with the date partially redacted. Due to failure on containment typically occurring, it's projected that this is referring to SCP-016, a sentient bloodborne pathogen. The 24th hand has Space-Time Destabilization occurring at some point, while the 25th just says, "Let there be chaos." The date has been expunged, although security measures have been increased in wake of this after some suspicious activity was detected on site involving a group of Chaos insurgents disguised as facility guards. Lastly, the 26th hand has the Jabberwocky event listed on it, and it's noted that the research staff are all looking forward to this. Unfortunately, that was the event related to SCP-1762 that resulted in the end of the dragons inside of it. Next, we have SCP-3200, a region of space currently 300 million light-years in diameter, the center of which is 700 million light-years from Earth, commonly referred to as the Boötes Void. At present, the exact properties of this region are unknown, as most research into the anomaly was conducted by the now defunct Peregrine Expedition program. As such, there is considerable debate into how exactly it functions, though the following principles are considered to be accurate. It represents an exceptionally thin and potentially open region of space-time such that trans-universal contact is possible through it. It is expanding at a rate of 1 million light-years per year, and this expansion poses a non-zero threat of a UK-class universal collapse scenario. All other points concerning its exact properties are considered to be highly speculative. The anomaly was first discovered by civilian scientists who noted that the region of space possessed significantly fewer galaxies than one would expect from any other region of space, as a region of that size should hold around 2,000 galaxies, while this one only holds 60. Foundation researchers conducting research into extrasolar anomalies noted extremely high Hume levels arising from 3200, which measures the level of reality in an area. Continued research into the anomaly wouldn't be seriously conducted, however, until the launch of the Peregrine expeditions in 2008. The original Peregrine expedition mission statement notes that with the creation of ever-sophisticated technology by members of their applied sciences divisions, they often find uses for various advances that they had never before considered. The creation of the first temporal sinks showed them that time can be manipulated, slowed down, or even held constant from the perspectives of different viewers. As such, they aim to use modified temporal sync devices in the launch of a new Foundation space initiative in order to better understand non-terrestrial anomalies. By speeding up time relative to us on Earth for the crew members, they can accomplish advanced space travel to many distant locations. Temporal sinks allow them to maintain the natural flow of time for both the observers on Earth and the crew members, maintaining causality in all frames of reference. It's a simple matter of cryogenically freezing the crew members for however long they intend to travel, activating their modified temporal sinks, and then waking them up when they arrive. Small-scale tests indicate that they could use these temporal sinks aboard fuel-efficient ion thruster-powered spacecraft to send researchers hundreds of millions of light-years away and back in the space of a few months, allowing them to vastly improve their knowledge of extrasolar anomalies. With that highly optimistic message, SCP-3200 was selected as the target of the Peregrine 9 expedition, launched November 29, 2010. A mechanical engineer, astrophysicist, and extrasolar containment specialist were sent, with the mission planning to take 6 years, 4 of which the team would be spending cryogenically frozen. In February of 2016, 9 months before it was scheduled to end, the Foundation recovered a capsule launched by Peregrine 9 consisting of modified segments of the original shuttle. We're given some of the relevant logs and transcripts found inside. The first is a video log taken shortly after they woke up, in which they note that they don't feel anything different despite being inside of the anomaly. When they look out the viewport, however, they see that it's pitch black, with no signs of any stars or galaxies visible. Later, the mechanical engineer/captain sits in front of the camera and reports that they've already hit a snag on day 1. The first thing they tried to do was verify the anomalous Hume levels, but their counters don't seem to be functioning properly here. The Hume levels are fluctuating rapidly, anywhere from almost 0 to absurd numbers in the hundreds. It would be quite the tragedy if they came all the way here with faulty counters. He then looks out the viewport and says that there does seem to be something off about this place, but they'll have to do more research. Another video from around 6 weeks later shows the 3 crew members sitting around a box of some kind. The captain reports that they woke up today and saw this box outside, floating around in the middle of space nowhere. They proceed to open the box, wherein they find a CD, which they put into one of their computers. A video file opens up on the computer, showing the captain sitting in front of the camera. He states his name and says that it's day 35 of the Peregrine 9 mission. There's still no signs of slowing down the anomaly's growth, and they can't get any good data on it either because they still can't get any of their counters working. They'll see what they can do though, and he signs off. A week later, the captain records another video on day 47 of the mission, and says that they've picked up about 12 more recordings of him speaking about the anomaly. They're still not getting any closer to answers though, as all of these other versions of him seem to know more than he does, since they all reference stopping SCP-3200. Also, the can't counters still don't work. The astrophysicist thinks that they're seeing something from other universes, which would explain where those things are coming from. The specialist, however, believes that something is off about the reality surrounding this anomaly, which would explain the malfunctioning can't counters, but they have no idea why that is either. There's another video from 5 months later, and the captain reports that they found 38 tapes of him so far. None of them are exactly the same, with each video having him in different clothes, with different dates, different hair, all kinds of things. What worries him the most is that they still haven't found out any details about what exactly SCP-3200 is doing. They're pretty sure that this is a region of some weird space-time stuff, as the astrophysicist is adamant that this is a region where space-time is pretty thin, allowing for contact between universes. They've also started finding more than just capsules, as they've found bodies, his own body, the other crew members, and even people that he's never seen before. There's also parts of shuttles using technology that he's never seen before, and other scraps of things that he doesn't understand at all. He shudders and says that there's something deeply wrong about this place, and it feels fundamentally misplaced, like it doesn't belong. In his personal notes a few weeks later, the captain wrote, "How many times? How many times have we been here? This is the question that keeps me up at night, the question that has brought me no rest. We are certainly not the first, and every other Kuznetsov out there seems to have been brought low by this same question. We recovered a log today. The man that I saw on that tape was old, very old. He had been recording the anomaly for a long time. Years, perhaps even decades. Thousands of tapes recovered. No answers. He had studied it for years and years, and nowhere did he find an answer to why this was happening. They say that the definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results. If so, then just how mad are we?" A couple of weeks later, the captain apparently vanished while attempting to retrieve another tape, reappearing 2 days later, extremely dehydrated and weak. The other crew members report that he recorded one more message before lapsing into a coma. It reads, "We were fools. The void isn't a region where space-time is ruined. It's the source of the tear itself. Space-time itself is rending itself apart, and we're seeing echoes of every timeline in the past and future. Time is an Ouroboros, devouring itself again and again, only to be reborn. I saw all of it, all of the times we tried to stop it in the past, all the times that I tried to stop it in the past, and the future. This happens again and again until we get it right. Over and over again, we try and try to fix it. All times blend together until we reach singularity, and all is lost. The tear opens more holes everywhere in reality, and the anomalies appear faster and faster, but containment is only delaying the inevitable cleansing of the slate. I saw all the timelines, and we haven't stopped it in any of them. Mater Boyja, we have seen into the abyss, and by God, it hates us. That was the last recorded event in the capsule recovered by the Foundation, and given the passing of the original end date of the mission, the expedition is considered to be lost. So, you have a massive region of empty space that apparently bleeds into other universes, connecting them all, and it's also expanding to eventually wipe out all existence. The Foundation in countless universes has sent a mission to figure out how to stop it, and has never come close. It's suggested that the time sync mechanisms they used to make the mission possible could have been what created the anomaly in the first place, as time is an Ouroboros. Yet another reality-ending threat potentially caused by those boneheads at the Foundation. Moving on, we have SCP-1968, a bronze torus of unknown composition around 10 feet across and marked with raised features or glyphs believed to act as control surfaces. It's difficult to photograph or visually inspect the object as it appears to bend light, and mild fluctuating gravitational effects have also been observed. It has also proved impossible to take a sample of it, and although it's not particularly heavy, studies suggest that neutronium may be present inside of it in vanishingly small quantities, a theoretical substance composed purely of neutrons that would be one of the densest states of matter possible. 1968 demonstrates its anomalous properties when it is handled by a human being, and when moderate force is applied to it, it will begin to deform in unpredictable ways. Its material composition will appear to change, and it will become animated, surrounding the individual in convolutions and undulating increasingly faster. Its primary effect will manifest itself when an unpredictable threshold is met, after which it will return to its original state. At this point, the individual will have had their memories altered, and they will no longer agree with the historical record. Their self-reported history will be at odds with Foundation personnel records, and as a consequence, they will often assume a posture of agitation and paranoia. The more pronounced the deformation of the artifact, the more divergent their memories will be. The object was recovered in late 2001 from a core sample extracted during a petrochemical survey in Greenland. Based on the depth from which it was recovered, along with corroborating paleoatmospheric readings, it's estimated to be around 31 million years old. Foundation personnel intercepted the radio transmission of its discovery, and owing to its unusual nature and age, moved to secure the artifact. Class B amnestics were administered to the personnel in Greenland, along with those individuals at the governing authority in Denmark who had been made aware of its discovery. Once on site, it was discovered that one of the engineers had been placed in a psychiatric hold after violently assaulting a colleague. It's presumed that they had handled the artifact. We're then handed a bunch of warnings about the following material and how we've been administered a lethal mimetic agent that has to be counteracted once security has confirmed our identity. We're informed that the previous description is a cover story based on what were their initial conclusions, and the anomaly's actual effects have proven to be very different. The first experiment with it had been pretty uneventful, with routine medical examinations on their test subject revealing no untoward effects. When they returned to their quarters, however, it appeared to them that their furniture had been altered, although no evidence could be found to support their claim. Subsequently, they seemed confused about their shifts of duty, when they were scheduled, and to whom they were to report. After the second experiment, they appeared alarmed and confused, as the laboratory seemed changed to them, and they professed that personnel appeared to be missing, while others were completely unfamiliar. Interrogation of the subject showed that they were in possession of drastically different memories, encompassing such areas as diverse as their personal history, the nature of Foundation assets, and the historical record. During an interview, They admitted to never hearing of a fellow researcher and friend before now, despite the other researcher knowing intimate details of their life. They also mentioned several SCPs that they've worked on, but the Foundation has never heard of any of them. At first, it was assumed that the artifact had in some unknown way affected their mind, but interrogation showed that their memories were extraordinarily detailed and self-consistent. Furthermore, they demonstrated knowledge of classified material to which they could not possibly have been exposed to. The operating assumption at the time was that the subject had been compromised by forces unknown. At the conclusion of the third trial, the subject's account of the previous experiments themselves were in stark contradiction with the record. Among other things, they claimed that it had been the 19th such experiment, and was able to offer a form of proof in the form of a testable experimental prediction. In an effort to corroborate their account of the changes occurring, measurements were performed inside the artifact's sphere of influence, with negative results. Efforts were suspended when, unexpectedly, back-channel reports surfaced of the discovery of just such phenomena at CERN in Switzerland at the time the anomaly had been in operation. Experiments were repeated away from the anomaly's immediate vicinity and succeeded in detecting the effect. Further experiments were performed as distantly as New Zealand, South Africa, and the Antarctic, reproducing the same findings. Even a probe in the space around Jupiter concluded the same. The vicinity within the anomaly's area of operation appeared insulated from the effect, however, perhaps by design. Based on the chronology of these experiments, it seems that the effect propagates nearly instantaneously at a rate comparable to the cosmological inflation which occurred shortly after the Big Bang. One interpretation of what's happening is that the entire universe is being affected by the anomaly, altering the universe's past while leaving the memories of the person operating the anomaly intact. In light of this possibility, all testing was suspended indefinitely, and the consent of all O5 members is required to perform further experiments. After testing was discontinued, the initial subject evaded Foundation supervision and attempted to take their own life, resulting in them becoming catatonic. 2 months later, the anomaly engaged itself without human intervention, and a person which superficially resembled the original subject emerged. They were badly wounded, having suffered unidentified chemical burns over 60% of their body, and they died shortly after without being able to be interviewed. It remains unknown how the artifact managed to activate itself. Another month later, the anomaly once again activated itself, this time disgorging a non-human entity heavily armed. It was ultimately neutralized after killing a dozen personnel and wounding many more, with a weapon behaving in a manner inconsistent with current understanding of physical law, and which resembled SCP-1968. The goal or purpose of the entity has not been established. The suggestion has been made that in the event of an imminent CK-class reality-ending scenario, the anomaly could be used in a last-ditch effort to avert catastrophe, but at the cost of irrevocably and unpredictably altering the past. Such a decision could not be made lightly, as to do so would ensure that the world as we know it would cease to exist. It's also been pointed out that if the artifact had already been used in this manner, they would have no evidence of it, and the incursions that took place might have been attempts to use the anomaly to accomplish exactly that. So, it's just a simple artifact that rewrites the timeline of the entire universe, except for one person who has to live with the memories of the previous, overwritten timeline. It's certainly among the most powerful and potentially damaging anomalies the Foundation has ever touched, and who knows how many lives were lost throughout all of their experiments with it. Let's end with SCP-2700. A complex mechanical device that's believed to be a sophisticated directed energy weapon developed by Nikola Tesla. It was discovered in 1946 and recovered from a defunct but heavily secured research facility utilized by Tesla during 1934. The anomaly consists of three components: the interface, the accelerator, and the core. The interface is a steel control console with a QWERTY keyboard, a display screen, and a number of buttons, switches, and levers. It's connected to the other parts by a network of copper wiring, and the screen features a command-based operating system, with commands and responses appearing in green block text. The nature of the interface's operating system is still under investigation. The accelerator is believed to be a linear particle accelerator, held in a lead-lined tungsten cylindrical chamber. The device contains all the components that would be required for a contemporary particle accelerator, though it is significantly smaller than a device of this design would require. Lastly, the core is a lead-lined tungsten assembly containing an apparatus of currently unclear function. It consists of a spherical frame constructed of an unidentified substance, suspended within a transparent sphere, the composition of which also remains unidentified. According to Tesla's notes, the space within this sphere is held in a perpetual vacuum state, and present within the frame is a continuous current of plasma, generated and perpetuated by unknown means. Available information suggests that particles produced in the core would then be introduced into the accelerator and accelerated as expected for such a device. Energetic particles would then be propelled from the terminus of the accelerator towards the intended target. How the device is powered and the exact nature of the particles produced by the core remained unclear. We're given a notice informing us that the next section is only for personnel of clearance level 4 or higher, and informed that, much like the last article, the above description has been falsified. SCP-2700 is a device originally constructed by Nikola Tesla with the purpose of producing a directed energy weapon. Investigation of the anomaly while in Foundation custody, however, has proven that it possesses a function distinct from and significantly more dangerous than its original designs. The interface and the accelerator are as they were described earlier, but the core isn't. The luminescent anomaly located in its center is not plasma, but rather a discrete energy phenomena now designated SCP-2700 Omega. Omega behaves inversely with regards to entropy, meaning that while the universe always moves towards higher entropy and more disorder, Omega does the opposite, entirely breaking the second law of thermodynamics. Due to this, the effective flow of time within this region is also reversed. Presently, the unidentified materials surrounding Omega are immune to its effects, and this appears to be the only factor preventing a breach of the phenomenon. If it were to escape the interior of the core, an inexorable chain reaction would occur, converting the rest of the universe to this inverted entropic state. The eventuality of this scenario would be a YK-class entropic annihilation event, resulting in the reduction of the entire universe to an infinitely energetic singularity, or basically, an inverted Big Bang. As indicated by the interface, the device is currently armed and set to activate in 2234, exactly 300 years after its initial arming. As this would inherently trigger a breach of Omega, current containment protocols must be completed prior to the set date to avert a YK-class event. We're then left with an excerpt from Tesla's personal log, which reads, "It stands before me, complete and inescapably counting down toward the nexus of my oversights and failures. Only 1 month ago, I was approached by a man I had never seen before. He was the most content person I had ever seen. His eyes felt like a window into serenity. He said he was looking for the most curious mind in the world, and I was it. Apparently, I wasn't hard to distinguish from the billions of other minds on the planet, Not that that surprises me. Somehow I knew immediately that he wasn't from here, and I felt self-conscious about this world, my world. It felt humiliating to me. I think he knew what I was feeling. During those brief windows when I was not isolated in my work, I would glimpse the events unfolding elsewhere. I never cared for what I saw. The world is too broken to feed itself, and it's responding like any hungry animal. It's angry. War is coming. I can only hope that in the conflict, nature will take its course, and the lingering degenerates of our species are expunged. It's because of the degenerates that war erupts, and war is the only thing that can clean them from civilization. That is the way of any system. When the unnecessary pieces build up to critical mass, chaos brings the destruction that returns things to equilibrium. But his smile just seemed to cut right through the maelstrom of disgust and inadequacy in my head. Then came the truth. He was looking for the most ingenious minds from each of the other universes. He found my lack of astonishment to the phrase, "other universes," surprising. I asked how many there were, and he said he did not know. In addition to his own and mind, they had only found 5 others that were coherent and could support life. If anything, I was astonished that there were only 7 found. He laughed at that, said I seemed promising to him. I asked him what he wanted me for. To unlock science's final secret. We prepared for departure over the next 24 hours. I asked the traveler if I could take my project with me and have his people look at it, to which he replied that it would be no problem. The Teleforce had hit substantial roadblocks. I had no way to develop a power source sufficient for it. I didn't tell him what it was. I just said it was just an accelerator, not a weapon. I didn't want him second-guessing my motivations. I thought that if I could complete it in his universe, I could bring it back and take care of the equilibrium problem myself. We left in the early morning. I admit, while the prospect of another universe didn't shock me considerably, the premise of actually traveling there was intriguing. The traveler grabbed my arm and adjusted something attached to his wrist. It resembled a simple watch, but I couldn't get a good look at it. There was an intense flash, and everything went black. For an instant, I thought I'd been blinded. Then I felt the terrifying free fall, tumbling through infinite darkness at unfathomable speed. I'd never been more frightened in all my life. Even so, I experienced wonder and anticipation such that I had never known. Then, in an instant, it all stopped. I opened my eyes and saw... Words fail to do it justice. More accurately, our words fail to do it justice. Just as I cannot write the traveler's true name in these letters and be satisfied with it, I cannot describe the transcendent beauty of his homeworld. It was a world with a pulse, a life that I could palpate, and at that point I felt the enormity of my world's hollow and primitive nature collapse upon me. I cried, not at his world's beauty, but at my world's sheer inferiority. I'm relieved that he never realized the real reason behind those tears. I was brought to a city. Again, I'm using the word city as nothing more than the most appropriate analog. There, the traveler introduced me to his family and to many of his people. That feeling of contentment that he gave me during our first encounter now surrounded me on all sides. My sense of shame only deepened. This world wasn't just better, it was the closest thing to perfection that I could possibly imagine. They weren't pointlessly cheery, but they would not tolerate any of the idiotic and trivial nonsense that people fret over here. Then I met the others, one from each universe, as the traveler explained to me, him being the representative of his own universe. I will not go into details on their appearances. This is irrelevant and ephemeral information that reveals nothing of their vast intellect and ingenuity. I spent at least a day simply talking with them. I kept my pocket watch with me during my visit. It was the only thing that kept record of Earth's time while I was there. They have their own form of time, of course, but it was more practical for me to keep using ours. I vastly enjoyed the time I spent conversing with them. We spoke of things I would never dare reference as science here, but they thought of it as no more strange than gravity itself. The traveler told everyone what the great project he had assembled us for was. We were to build a perpetual energy generator. Not only did this instill in me appropriately infinite fascination, but I identified that this was just what the Teleforce needed. Naturally, I volunteered my device to them to be the test subject for the generator once it was finished, just to see if it worked. To my delight, they accepted this proposal and we got to work. Over the course of a few short weeks, we compiled our data, and at last it was I that found the solution. The properties of two specific substances, each from a different universe, when in interaction should produce the reaction that would catalyze infinite energy. Both samples had been taken from universes that were inhospitable to our form of life. Their subatomic nature was not only at odds with the realm in which I was residing, but with each other. It was only by virtue of a causal membrane the others provided me with that the samples could remain in existence here. I was certain that this paradoxical interaction was the key. I pored over the notes for nights, trying to finalize the designs. It was at that time that one of the others came to me, offering his help. The Watcher is what I like to call him. That is what he did. He watched me all the time. I don't know why, and he claimed I was just interesting. Certainly disconcerting, but I can admit to having the same feeling myself often. He peered over my notes and pointed out something I had missed, a simple error I had overlooked. With that, my calculations were complete, and we were ready to begin the test. I was ecstatic. The day came, and the Traveler and I loaded the core into the Teleforce for our initial test. At first, everything was going as we had foreseen, but when we inspected it 1 hour later, one of the others noticed something unusual. The amount of energy inside the core seemed to be diminishing, which didn't make any sense at all. Then the horrific realization came. It wasn't diminishing. The energy was converging upon itself infinitely. The core was reversing the flow of entropy. None of the others failed to see the critical danger of this predicament. If we could not neutralize the reaction, it could disrupt the flow of entropy for the entire universe. It would reverse time to the birth of existence. Hastily, I accessed the console of the Teleforce and saw that someone had set it to activate in 300 years. I tried to disable it, but I could not. The system would not recognize my commands, which can only mean that someone sabotaged the console. Then it clicked in my head with absolute certainty. I spun to face the Watcher and declared him the culprit of the situation. He gave a smile that seemed to contain more malice than any one being should be capable of. He denied nothing and went further. He explained that only he knew how to deactivate the Teleforce, and that disassembling it would do nothing but spread the reaction sooner. He leered at me in that way he always had, and I cursed myself for not figuring him out sooner. Some greatest mind I was. Then he said it. What right did I have to hold him with contempt when I too came here to complete a weapon? Clearly those wretched eyes had found my journal, for he then begun to describe the Teleforce's function and purpose. He commended me for coming to another universe to build it, rather than risk building it in my own, as it was exactly what he did. Why did he set it to 300 years? It was merely a safeguard to ensure it didn't activate while he was still there.
The Watcher then disappeared back to his own universe, taking the only device capable of reaching it with him. We were left there with my great invention, now a time bomb for this universe that I had grown so fond of. Why did the Watcher want to create such a weapon in the first place? I don't know or care anymore. All I cared about was the fear and hopelessness of the Traveler, his family, and his world. It was my theories that brought this upon them. It was all my fault. The Traveler, though, did not blame me, and I think that was the final sign that I had to do what I did. I took the Teleforce back here. I took the death of existence back to my universe where it belonged. I have betrayed all life forms in this cosmos. I have betrayed our entire future. I am not sorry, and I am not apologizing. I could not let my legacy be the destruction of a universe I was not even worthy of. It seems I will in the end bring the equilibrium I desired, and it will be the end of our degenerate universe. The Teleforce is locked away safely. I spend my long hours before the pond with the birds. They are so blissfully unaware of what approaches, and that gives me just enough tranquility to tolerate my own existence. A reversal of energy, of entropy, of time. If reversing time was a simpler task, perhaps I could have stopped this from ever happening and save our universe. No, I wouldn't have. I would have made our universe one worth saving. So, to sum all that up then, Tesla was taken by a traveler from another universe to a utopia, along with a bunch of other scientists, to make a perpetual energy machine. Tesla ends up figuring out how to do it and finishes his machine with it, but it turns out that the core, made of two substances from other universes, is now experiencing reverse entropy. What's more, he can't deactivate it, because one of the other scientists wanted him to do all this in order to destroy this universe, for reasons left unknown. Rather than leaving the machine there to destroy the nice universe, he brings it back to destroy our crappy one instead. Time and time again, we've seen that nothing good comes from people getting involved with the fundamental concepts of reality, but there's just something so alluring about playing God that keeps people coming back to it. There aren't many people that haven't thought about having the ability to go back or forward in time, or relive a moment, or change something, but thankfully that ability continues to elude humanity. Time might not really be on our side, but it's far better to just let it do its thing rather than poke it with a stick. SCP-8770 Submechanophobia. I miss you. Of the various phobias we've covered recently, submechanophobia has to be among the most rational. It's a fear of submerged man-made objects, and granted, that does include stuff that's really pretty harmless, such as underwater statues and buoys, but it also includes shipwrecks. Being underwater in an ocean is already a place humans weren't really ever meant to be, but inside of a dark, decrepit, rusting structure adds on a whole other layer. Of course, this is an SCP we're talking about, so SCP-8770 is absolutely a thing that no human should ever go into. And yet that's exactly what we're going to read about. Let's take a look.
The containment procedures for 8770 state that ship traffic is to be diverted from the area containing 8770, and buoys placed around the area are to be checked on a monthly basis to ensure that they haven't shifted. If their placement has shifted, a diving team is to be dispatched, and 8770 is to be monitored for changes in its geometry. Otherwise, the anomaly is to be left abandoned. It is not to be inhabited. SCP-8770 is a vessel in a state of irregular structural flux, located upon the sea floor of the Atlantic Ocean. Its exterior most frequently resembles that of a man-made sunken vessel, roughly 355 meters in length on average. While external changes to the vessel occur at seemingly random intervals, there have been some notable or consistent shifts. These include changes in the materials that make up its outer structures, such as metal into wood, or instances of stone, fabric, or glass. There have been occurrences of new walls, which suggest the creation of additional internal rooms, as well as large junctions of metal beams jutting downwards towards the sea floor, and indistinct railings along the vessel's top portions. Steering apparatuses have appeared resembling those found on ships of inconsistent age, as well as nonsensical directional signs, wires, and engine structures and propellers consistent with that of motorized boats and submarines. There have even been roofs, sidings, windows, and doors resembling those found on residential homes. All of the structures on the vessel are often in states of high decay and water damage, and the undersea area around it is almost a complete ecological dead zone, devoid of all marine life, with the exception of some corals that have grown on the anomaly. During initial analysis, it was discovered that the vessel exerts a minor mimetic influence on its surroundings, increasing feelings of unease and discomfort in those that are within 5 meters of its exterior. All attempts to access the interior of the vessel with unmanned submersibles has resulted in the complete cessation of all technological functions upon entry. Approximately 3 submersibles were lost before the prospect of a manned investigation was proposed and subsequently approved. Rather than sending in some unfortunate D-class, however, they sent in some MTF teams. The first 4 manned expeditions into the vessel were to determine the internal dimensions of its interior. The teams were instructed to remain on the outskirts, staying along the exterior wall as much as possible, and over the course of these explorations, several things were noted. The interior was notably clear of any water damage that would be expected of a structure of this nature, but that was hardly the most anomalous part. Hallways, doors, and windows appeared and disappeared randomly between each expedition, along with the overall interior dimensions, and the vessel's interior does not match the dimensions of its exterior, in spite of exterior shifts. The 5th manned expedition was sent to try to discover the center of the vessel, and the subsequent log comprises the remainder of the article. 3 members of MTF Gamma 6 Deep Feeders, with the codenames of Black Carpet, Ningen, and Matagi Carcass, were deployed to find the center of the anomaly. To determine if its mimetic properties intensify by internal proximity, their heart rates were monitored and recorded. The team approaches the top portion of the vessel, noting that it has the appearance of the upper deck of a commercial fishing ship. There are broken posts and rotted barrels, with 2 paddle wheels emerging from parts of the hull, their bottom halves seemingly fused into the rusted metal. These antiquated pieces appear out of time and place. The vessel visibly stretches on for roughly 30 meters in all directions, the rest of the anomaly obscured by the cloudy water, leaving only distant silhouettes and shadows. The water is still, devoid of movement and life as the team draws closer. Ningen remarks that there's an opening in the floor of the hull up ahead, which should make for easy entry. The 3 swim to the gap in the hull, finding a ladder covered in algae and barnacles. They swim inside, seeing that the interior appears like that of a standard submersible. They all turn on their headlights, and Ningen wraps a strip of reflective, waterproof tape around one of the rungs of the ladder to help them keep track of where they've been. Matagi wonders if that'll work, since the interior of this place seems to shuffle around, but Ningen says that hopefully when it shuffles there's a rhyme and reason to it, while Black Carpet says that it's better than nothing at all. Matagi asks if there's something in here they want them to find, but Black Carpet says that they just want to see if there's a center to this thing, a source. Although there's no life anywhere around this thing, and anything mobile seems to avoid it like the plague. Matagi remarks that that's good for them then, but it sure sounds like the exact opposite. Ningen pulls out a heavy-duty compass, and the other two follow him as he swims down the corridor. The visibility is considerably low, only allowing sight roughly a meter ahead. After approximately 10 seconds, they find a hatch at the end of the hall. Ningen moves to open it, but it turns before he touches it. There's a loud hissing sound as he gasps through his respirator, and his heart rate increases. The hatch wheel turns completely before slowly opening inwards without being touched, and the team notes that they feel a current. They inform Command, who just tells them to keep going but to be on alert. They proceed through into a living room, decorated with several pieces of furniture, all facing an inactive television. The floor is carpeted, and there's a bookshelf against the far wall, which Black Carpet approaches. Matagi notes that nothing here is rotten or covered in coral, compared to the exterior, which looks like it's been underwater for decades. Ningen brushes his hand along the carpet, which stirs up no debris, before moving over to wrap some tape around a lamp. His and Matagi's heart rate is stable, but Black Carpet's suddenly rises. She tells them to come look at this so she knows that her eyes aren't playing tricks on her. She's holding one of the books from the bookshelf, which is undamaged by the water. Random assortments of words and letters fill the pages without rhyme or reason, with some pages entirely blank. Ningen says that she's seen it right. It's all gibberish. Matagi heads into the adjoining kitchen, finding a dining table and 4 chairs. This room is also untouched by rot, rust, or any other signs of water damage. On the table are placemats, plates, and silverware laid out and organized. The rest of the kitchen features a set of cupboards above a counter with a sink, as well as a fridge and an oven. The wires from the fridge are spread out all over the floor, but none of them seem to be live. Ningen remarks that it looks like everybody just up and left during dinner, but Black Carpet asks if there's any signs here of this place ever being inhabited. Matagi opens a couple of the cupboards and the fridge, finding them all to be empty, so Ningen informs Command of what they've found. Command asks if there's any other paths to go, while Black Carpet fiddles with the knobs on the oven, seeing one of the back burners start to glow red as she does so. She swiftly turns it off, and the three head down another hallway into a child's bedroom. The interior is also pristine in spite of the water, with a small bed, a nightstand, and a bureau, all untouched and undamaged. The walls appear to be pale, but the exact color is difficult to discern because of the water. Matagi searches the bureau and finds it filled with children's clothes that look to be unworn. She swiftly closes the drawer to keep them from floating upwards, while Ningen swims up to the ceiling to grab a suspended teddy bear. He turns it in his hands and sees the front of it covered in dark splotches of mold and rot, as well as bits of coral, causing him to swear and drop it. The 3 team members' heart rates all rise as he hisses through his respirator in surprise. Black Carpet picks up and examines it, while Matagi checks the ceiling where Ningen found it, noting that it seems to still be solid and devoid of damage. They're unsure as to why the bear is the only thing they've found with water damage, but they decide to leave it here for now. The bear floats back up to the ceiling, its rotted face now staring at the team as they swim back out. In the hallway, they now see a new door that's ajar, reporting the first structural shift to Command.
They enter through the door after Ningen marks the handle with tape, and proceed for the next hour and a half. During this time, they pass 44 bedrooms, 18 kitchens, 26 bathrooms, and 14 living rooms. The furniture within the rooms ranges wildly in time period with little consistency. Periodically, they leave an indication of their path via fluorescent tape. As they progress through hallway after hallway, they note that water damage and rust has become noticeable in places, with holes in some walls and visible pipes underneath. There's also discordant rods of metal, scattered instances of rotted wood, or furniture against otherwise pristine pieces. The team stops for a brief break within the 15th living room, having to have opened a ship hatch to enter it. There's a window on the far wall of the room, and their compass shows it to be an impossibility in relation to the rest of the vessel. Beyond it is an expanse of water, with their light illuminating a massive tangle of wires and pipes in the distance. There are unclear silhouettes past the tangle that appear to be moving, causing Black Carpet's heart rate to rise. Matagi is examining the walls of the connecting halls, glancing around at the rooms, and she notes that it almost feels deliberate. It's been on her mind since the first room, that this all feels like it's all been set up for something, or someone. Black Carpet counters that maybe it was supposed to be, but she doesn't think it is anymore. She turns back to the window, which is now gone, comparing it to when a landlord paints the walls to hide the wood rot. She traces her hand where the window was, causing flecks of rust to float off the wall. Ningen asks if they're diving past those cover-ups then, and Matagi wonders if they keep going, maybe they'll find what this thing truly is then. Command notes that they only have enough air for 5 more hours, but the team agrees to keep going deeper in. They continue for another 30 minutes, until Matagi notices that one of the rotted boards along the floor is shifting. She reaches downward and lifts it, finding a fish wrapped in wire and cables. It looks as if it's impaled on some piping, but there's no sharp point or end to the pipe, as if it had wound itself through the fish. The fish is also still alive, but electrical wiring weaves through its flesh and scales, holding it tight. Its fins have melted into the rotted wood. The text here slightly diverges from a standard log, as the page subtly darkens in brightness, and some of the text takes on a less formal tone. Also, certain parts are written in blue instead of black. The text states that the fish lives here and loves it here. Matagi's heart rate increases significantly upon seeing it, and she asks Command to confirm what she's seen, which they do. Ningen says that they should keep moving, so Matagi returns the floorboard to where it was. Command, in blue text, says that a shipwreck is a type of corpse, but the others don't reply to this, and they continue. The halls have widened at this point, so the team is able to swim side by side. Blue text states that the wallpaper is beautiful, and there are flowers painted on them, little yellow ones. The team enters a massive room, with blue text stating that there are pillars stretching up to the ceiling, and the floor is polished stone. It is like an entryway to something grand, with dancing patterns across the walls in bright and lively colors. Ningen comments on a sound, and Matagi says that she thinks it's the pipes, before turning on a stronger light. Their heart rate increases as they start moving through the room and swimming upwards. There is a loud humming in the air, vibrating the water, with the blue text stating that the walls are singing. Black Carpet tells the others to watch the wires, as they can't tell if they're live or not, and this whole place has been inconsistent with what does and doesn't have juice in it. Matagi notes that it's a bit of a tangled mess in here, while the blue text states that the room is expansive and open. The team squeezes past a trio of pipes, brushing rust and coral into the water. Ningen remarks that it's starting to look more like a ship here, as if a submarine's engine room exploded, and Matagi wonders if it actually is an engine room, due to how much noise there is. The team maneuvers past more tangles of wires and pipes, and Ningen catches a glimpse of 2 fish swimming and playing amongst the halls, even though this is supposed to be a dead zone. A circular structure laid into the ceiling above rotates within a rusted steel frame. Beyond it, a large fan with metal blades spins, and between this noise and the others, the team's speech is drowned out. Matagi is seen putting a hand against the side of her head, but they eventually locate a hatch within the room, pulling it open. They enter into a hallway, followed by a 16th living room, and the blue text states that it's better here. It's quiet, free of the rot and the pain, and it hurts less here. It's sorry. They proceed to travel down the halls for roughly 10 minutes, finding more bedrooms and living spaces, all heavily damaged and with fallen pieces of furniture strewn about. Matagi asks what the status on their tanks is, and Ningen checks to see that they're at 4 hours left. Since they've been in here for over 2 hours, they agree that it's probably wise to turn back now. Ningen informs Command, and the blue text responds, asking them if they know how it feels to fall apart and to rot. It states that it hurts, it aches, and it can feel the seawater eating it more and more as seconds, minutes, days, years, decades pass by. It corrodes, it burns, and the cold waters do not save it. Obviously, the actual Command said something different, as Matagi just replies that they'll start to head out. The team turns to swim back the way they came, reaching the end of the hall, but the hatch they came through is now gone. All of their heart rates raise significantly, and Ningen reaches out to touch the wall, which looks as though it hasn't been touched in decades. The team spends roughly 10 minutes attempting to use an underwater saw to cut through the wall, but they're unsuccessful, as the saw is unable to pierce deep enough into the metal. Matagi says that there were other halls they didn't take, so maybe something loops back around. Ningen's hands are now shaking, and Black Carpet informs Command of the situation. The blue text states that it's going to be okay, while Command wishes them luck and tells them to be careful. Black Carpet tells the others to take steady breaths, as they can't go burning through their oxygen. They have around 4 hours still, so they should keep trying some of the other halls. The blue text bids them to come inside. Matagi shakes her head and follows, while Ningen keeps his hand braced on the wall for a few more moments before exhaling and also following. With the angle of the floor, it looks as if the team is descending deeper. They spend the next 30 minutes searching for an exit, while the blue text states that they will find that it is beautiful and that the doors are long sealed shut. They spend another 2 hours searching for an exit, but are still unsuccessful. Ningen says that this isn't working, and he can barely see, while the others tell him that they can't just give up. The blue text states that there are so many rooms for them to stay. Ningen continues to angrily state that they're running out of oxygen and they're deeper than before, so they're not going to make it. Matagi begs him not to say that, while Black Carpet braces her hand against a rotted wall before jerking it away swiftly. The water is filled with dirt and debris and algae, and the blue text tells them not to look for them, as it's okay. Ningen and Matagi both exclaim, wondering where Black Carpet went, before Ningen swears and starts swimming again, with Matagi following. Ningen says that they're going to get the hell out of here, and they can either spend it trying to find Black Carpet while all of them drown, or maybe only one of them drowns. Black Carpet is smart, so maybe she can find a different way. Command tells the two to remain calm, and they ask if they have any read on Black Carpet, Command replies that her heart's still beating, but they've lost all visual. Ningen just continues, and the blue text tells them not to look behind the walls. It loves them, and these walls love them. Ningen and Matagi swim for another 10 minutes before entering a living room, with overturned furniture, water damage, and a bent lamp. Ningen scans the room before approaching a window, trying to open it and break it to no avail. He hangs his head as Matagi scans down some more hallways, noticing what looks to be one of their tape markers down one of them. The two swiftly swim towards it, finding a strip of reflective tape attached to a pipe next to a door. Ningen excitedly heads through the door, while Matagi glances back hesitantly before following. Further through the next series of rooms, they find another marker, and Command asks how they're doing. Matagi informs them that they've found their markers, and Command tells them to keep going, as the recovery vessel is waiting for them up top. The two quickly move through more rooms over the next 15 minutes, finding more markers, until they enter a living room and see a bent lamp. Matagi and Ningen's heart rate is raised, although Black Carpet's is still stable. The blue text tells them to stop trying to look, but the two continue moving until passing the bent lamp a fourth time, causing Matagi to stop and point out that they've been going in circles. Ningen doesn't believe it, as they would have noticed the same halls, but Matagi decides to test it by placing a lit flashlight on one of the couches. The two continue following the tape markers, now with a little over 2 hours of air left, but Ningen's breathing rate is faster paced now. They end up back in the living room with the bent lamp, and there is a lit flashlight on the couch. The blue text tells them to just come inside and to bring their warmth, as the walls miss the warmth. The walls are writhing, the wood creaks and splinters, but Ningen and Matagi see a new hallway that wasn't there before. Without a word, the two swim down it, following another set of markers into what looks like the engine room from earlier. Matagi begins to say that maybe this means something, but they turn a corner into a room with no exits, and hundreds of strips of fluorescent tape tied around pipes hanging from the ceiling. Ningen begins to panic, causing heavy bursts of bubbles to emit from his respirator, while Matagi stays still, looking up at the strips of tape. She asks if it's mocking them, and Ningen exclaims that they don't even know if there is an it, as they could just be losing it, lost in some hellscape. He swims backwards, and his back and arm touch the walls, causing him to begin to scream. Matagi whips around and tries to grab him, but his thrashing causes dirt and rust and algae to cloud the water. Matagi calls out to Command on the verge of tears, with Ningen heard sobbing, but Command doesn't respond. The blue text states that it is without a purpose if it is without them. It needs them, and needs them to come to it. It tells them to go to the shoreline and watch the waves, slip off your shoes and step onto the sand, getting into the water, dive deep below and find it, and come inside where it's safe. The doors will be open for you. It will be open for you so that you may come inside. You can save it from the rot and the pain. You can bring your warmth into these halls. It's made for you because it loves you. It misses you. Matagi is alone, her breathing labored against the respirator. Her flipper had touched the floor and she has become embraced. There is another fish fused against the wall, its tail and head jerking. It is safe, happy. It turns its head to look at her as she struggles, and it states that it's home. Matagi begins to weep, with the blue text stating that she weeps because the joy is within reach. Her heart rate has raised significantly, but Ningen and Black Carpet's is stable. Command asks if any of the team copy, and the blue text states that it promises they're okay. It has them. All 3 team members' heart rates are now stable, and the blue text states that it won't let go. Everything is going to be okay. We're then given some non-blue text that states that Gamma 6 never left. They couldn't have. So here they lay, twitching and writhing against the frame. This place holds, and it does not let go. It is lonely. How could it not be? Wires wind into flesh, pull it taut against sea-eaten metal and rotted wood. A desperate, fatal embrace. The wood melts into their wetsuits, fusing them to these walls. Command tries to sputter out cries through broken communications, and it falls upon ears that can no longer answer. It is hungrily devoured by the water that surrounds in all its crushing power, so far and deep below. They lay with mouths gaping, with fingers twitching, like a fish soon to die. But no, they will not die. Not yet. It will not let them. It wants their warmth, the warmth of the living inside it once again. If that warmth comes through blood in the water, then let it be so. A house is not a home without people within. A ship is without purpose if there is no one to steer. A shipwreck is a type of corpse. The wires are in their organs now too. It infests everything that it can, everything that it can hold. Red wires through arteries like a mockery of blood. Blue wires through gray matter, holding. Glass of face masks crack. Respirators sputter out bursts of failing air when their throats fail to produce a sound. The tanks will last them 2 hours more. The hull, the wall, the house creaks. Its foundation is settling. The wires are in their eyes. Their skulls have melted to the metal. They are finally at peace. The last bit of text states that SCP-8770 is not to be inhabited, but some words are instead crossed out to state that SCP-8770 is inhabited. Lastly, we're given the last recovered image of Gamma 6, showing a nondescript section of the vessel and 3 spots noted as having a stable heart rate. Not to be callous or anything, but this is exactly why the Foundation usually sends in D-Class first. I think if someone had said the basic premise of this article is that it's about a haunted shipwreck that eats people, you'd assume that it's a bargain bin horror movie, but the writing here is certainly unnerving. The anomaly isn't really malicious or evil, even though it seems to be aware that what it's doing is wrong. It's just incredibly lonely and wants the warmth of life inside of it once again, since everything in the entire region avoids it like a plague. With the current containment procedures in place, it's unlikely that it'll ever get any warmth ever again, but who's to say that its mimetic effects won't grow stronger, maybe even drawing people down into the ocean to come inside of it. I know it's not the Foundation's style, but this certainly seems like something they should just torpedo and be done with, if only to put the team out of their misery.